Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie Jurassic World Dominion 2022, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. A hush falls over the valley as dawn's first light spills through jagged peaks, illuminating fractures in ancient stone like the rib cages of sleeping giants. Mist rolls across sprawling fields where dinosaurs now roam free, reclaiming a world that once belonged solely to mankind. It is here, in this fragile dawn of coexistence, that our story takes root, an epic tapestry woven from the threads of wonder and danger, of primal instinct and human ambition. As the camera lifts above the treetops, we glimpse herds of long-necked behemoths grazing beneath skies streaked with rose and gold, a tableau of prehistoric majesty reborn in the modern age. Yet amid this beauty lies tension, for where giants roam, uncertainty follows close behind. Across continents, scattered enclaves of humanity tremble at the prospect of living beside creatures born of chaos theory and genetic engineering. In remote villages shuttered against the night, parents whisper cautionary tales to wide-eyed children who dream not of heroes and princesses, but of razor-toothed hunters slipping through moonlit foliage. In one such town, a lone lamppost flickers as footsteps thunder against cobblestone streets. The silhouette of a velociraptor, its claws clicking like quicksilver, briefly kisses the lamplight before vanishing into the shadows. A child's scream shatters the stillness, and the world remembers anew that life has returned in forms both wondrous and deadly. Our tale weaves through the heart of this precarious landscape. A team of daring operatives, scientists, conservationists, and a few hardened veterans of the original park's tumultuous past, sets out on a mission to restore balance. They navigate jungle thickets heavy with humidity, guided by sensors that pulse in their hands like alien hearts. Each step carries the promise of discovery, a hidden valley where flying reptiles wheel overhead like prehistoric kites, or the murky depths of a primeval lake that hides leviathans older than any memory. Yet every triumph is shadowed by the threat of miscalculation. One wrong move, one misread signal, and the hunters become the hunted. At the epicenter of this journey stands a secluded research facility perched on volcanic rock. It glows like a beacon against darkening skies, its terraced laboratories carved into the mountainside. Here, cutting-edge geneticists toil to unravel nature's secrets, their microscopes aimed at strands of DNA as ancient as time itself. But ambition, as always, courts hubris. When a rogue sequence unleashed by a single oversight triggers gene expression in the most fearsome predators, the facility becomes a crucible of chaos. Lab doors slam open as raptors slip through corridors like shadows at noon. The thunder of tyrannosaur feet shakes steel-reinforced floors to their core. Amid the turmoil, our heroes must decide between salvation and sacrifice. A charismatic paleobotanist, eyes alight with both wonder and dread, races against molten lava rising in the valley below. She deciphers the code of dinosaur resilience even as embers swirl at her heels. Beside her, a grizzled tracker, once an outcast from the earliest experiments, utters grim curses at each roar echoing across rocky precipices. His knowledge of these creatures, born of tragedy and trauma, proves invaluable as they tiptoe between teeth and flame. In hushed moments, they share memories, a lost friend swallowed whole in a blink, a quiet dawn spent sketching in the throes of awe. Their bond, forged in shared peril, pulses like vital blood through the story's veins. But these human struggles are mirrored by forces beyond flesh and bone. Deep in the island's volcanic heart, seismic sensors jag with tremors, signs that nature itself reels from mankind's meddling. One night, under a sky scorched by lightning, rock splitters awaken in a long-dormant pass, and a lost valley of ice-era relics spills forth into the world. Woolly mammoths emerge from frost-shrouded forests, trumpeting a rebellion older than any science. Feathers beat through the chill air as saber-toothed cats pad across thawed tundra, their eyes gleaming with hunger at the edge of human encampments. In this convergence of epochs, every rule is rewritten, and the delicate promise of coexistence frays like worn rope. Amid this prehistoric resurgence, A darker current runs through the research facility's corridors. Corporate suits, dressed in tailored suits rather than field gear, hover in glass offices high above the chaos. They monitor every feed, weighing the cost of wildlife insurance payouts against the potential profits of gene therapies and entertainment spectacles. When one executive coldly calculates that a breakout could boost stock prices more than any safety record ever could, the stage shifts from mere survival to corporate intrigue. Whispers of sabotage dance through the vents as rival factions vie for control of a secret lab notebook that holds the blueprint for resurrecting an apex predator beyond imagination. As if this were not enough to threaten the fragile alliance between man and beast, a clandestine paramilitary band, shadows in fatigues, moves through jungle corridors, their weapons gleaming beneath tarps. They believe the era of dinosaurs does not herald coexistence, but conquest. Where our team sees the opportunity to heal the rift, these zealots see warped salvation, a new world order crowning the strong and culling the weak. Nightfall finds them lacing snares, forging black market deals for live captures, and planting seed bombs loaded with growth accelerants in forbidden groves. Each trap they set carries the weight of a calculated atrocity, a bid to harvest not insight but dominion over living myth. In this crucible of competing ambitions, key revelations shatter certainties. A hidden sanctuary surfaces, concealed by seismic upheaval until the island's geology cracked like an egg. Within, herds of herbivores roam unafraid, Triceratops grazing in emerald glades, Stegosaurus wandering through fern-shrouded grottos. Their sickle-shaped back plates catch the sun, casting shifting shadows that appear to dance in a silent festival of survival. It is a place untouched by corporate greed and human folly, a living memorial to the world that once was. Yet when the trackers glimpse the sanctuary from a ridge, they also spot a contingent of mercenaries scanning the valley through thermal scopes. They know that this haven of peace might yet become the battleground for a new breed of war, one where prizes are flesh and memory alike. Meanwhile, beneath the volcano's roaring belly, lava tunnels pulse with incandescent promise and peril. Here, our paleobotanist and tracker descend on foot, seeking to sabotage the paramilitary supply lines that snake along subterranean passages. Their only guide is a battered map drawn by an earlier expedition, scrawled in margins smudged with charcoal and fear. The deeper they venture, the hotter the walls glow, as if the earth herself warns them to turn back. Yet in the molten gloom, they uncover a revelation that reshapes every calculation, a hidden registry of dinogenetic sequences the facility never intended to disclose. It lists creatures born of pure experimentation, fossils fused with recombinant splices that yield beasts that shatter every known boundary between species. Here, our paleobotanist and tracker descend on foot, seeking to sabotage the paramilitary supply lines that snake along subterranean passages. Their only guide is a battered map drawn by an earlier expedition, scrawled in margins smudged with charcoal and fear. The deeper they venture, the hotter the walls glow, as if the earth herself warns them to turn back. Yet in the molten gloom, they uncover a revelation that reshapes every calculation, a hidden registry of dinogenetic sequences the facility never intended to disclose. It lists creatures born of pure experimentation, fossils fused with recombinant splices that yield beasts that shatter every known boundary between species. These new monsters, their names spelled out like unholy runes, promise to tip the scales irrevocably. When the surface world convulses under the sight of the volcanic summit erupting, figures appear on the horizon, every dinosaur on the island, drawn by the storm's siren call, charging toward the lava fields as though compelled by ancient instinct. Raptors vault across geysers of steam, their claws skidding on volcanic glass. Brachiosaurus rear back, shaking the earth so hard that distant mountain chains shudder. Fighters and scientists alike converge in pitched chaos, jagged against the red sky, and in that moment, fate distills into a singular choice: to marshal science as a force for stewardship, or to bend nature to the will of power and profit. In the heart-pounding climax, the paleobotanist races to deploy a counteragent, a molecular inhibitor devised to neutralize runaway gene accelerants, from the cliff's edge as tectonic plates grind beneath her boots. The tracker stands sentinel, warding off a horde of raptors ravenous from the upheaval. The volcano's roar crescendos into a deafening roar, a wall of flame surging like a living tsunami. Time fractures into shards of possibility. Will the agent disperse in the storm's wind, calming the genetic maelstrom enough to save the sanctuary? Or will the chemical cascade fail, mutating the very spray into a scented fog that drives predators maddened by altered instincts? Yet as the wind rips at her hair and the ground betrays her, she hurls the charge into the maelstrom. In slow motion, we watch the solution bloom in the sky, a swirling ribbon of luminescent green against an infernal canvas of orange and red. Dinosaurs falter mid-stride, their horns and talons twitching as the molecular tide reshapes their very being. The eruption pauses, as if stunned by the unexpected cure. Then, with a burst of hope as bright as any star, rain begins to fall, a soft baptism that settles over cracked earth and feathered wings alike, promising renewal. As the dust settles and survivors emerge from volcanic haze, they glimpse of dawn unlike any before it. The sanctuary's grass, revived by rain, trembles with a verdant heartbeat beneath a sky clearing of ash. Herds of dinosaurs move through this new world, no longer haunted by the specter of human arrogance but guided by the faintest promise of coexistence. The research team, battered and bloodied, stands amid this living miracle, each face etched with awe, guilt, and the unspoken vow to tread more lightly upon the earth they share with creatures born millions of years before. Their success came through the perilous melding of courage, compassion, and the razor's edge of scientific insight. But as the camera lifts above this reborn realm, capturing the slow march of ceratopsians across glistening plains, a final frame lingers on a single parapet of volcanic rock. There, the charred remains of a mercenary encampment smolder beneath a banner emblazoned with a stark promise: mastery or ruin. It flaps in the wind like a dark question posed to this fragile rebirth. Will humanity embrace stewardship, or will the siren call of dominion resurface to sunder the fragile bonds of coexistence? In that lingering moment, our adventure surrenders its last secret, that the greatest twist lies not in the genetic marvels or the corporate machinations, but in the choice each soul must make when faced with the power to shape life itself. For in the land where giants walk again, the future hinges not on who controls the gene sequencer, but on whether the human heart can rise above its own shadow. As the screen fades, we are left poised at the brink of tomorrow, a story etched in dinosaur roar and human resolve, where the final chapter has yet to be written by those brave enough to live alongside the echoes of the past. The sun rose over a world forever altered, golden rays spilling across fields once quiet, now alive with thunderous footsteps. Our story unfolds in a countryside where the silhouettes of dinosaurs roam freely among rolling hills and winding country roads. Here, humanity has taken its first uncertain steps toward coexistence with creatures that once ruled the earth. In one tucked-away corner, a raptor, sleek, intelligent, and unmistakably aware, slipped through a farm gate under cover of morning mist, its keen eyes scanning barns and pastures as though seeking kin. It was in this world of fragile peace that two figures emerged, drawn together by both history and hope, a man whose life had been shaped by the bond he forged with that very species, and a woman whose fierce devotion to conservation had led her to dedicate every breath to protecting these reclaimed giants. Their reunion was not born of comfort but of necessity. Across the globe, whispers of chaos drifted on the wind, reports of viral outbreaks among livestock, of daring attacks on remote research outposts, and most alarming of all, of a shadowy organization moving in the dark corners of international politics to seize control of a new bioengineered weapon. In a sun-dappled forest clearing, the pair found themselves shoulder to shoulder once more, scanning the treetops for signs of danger. Leaves trembled at an unseen breath, and the distant cry of a pterosaur spiked the air with warning. Without exchange of word, they had too little time for pleasantries. They set off toward a hidden valley where the next clue to mankind's peril lay waiting along narrow dirt roads carved into rocky slopes. They encountered an unexpected discovery, a makeshift camp of survivalists who had chosen to shelter alongside triceratops herds grazing against sunset skies. The camp's leader, a wiry ex-military tracker, greeted them with wary eyes, revealing that he had witnessed genetically altered insects swarming through his crops, mutants whose sting carried a paralytic toxin encoded by the same rogue sequence rumored to animate a new breed of predator. His voice, rough as gravel, spoke of farmers falling ill overnight, of fields abandoned in the dark of panic. The man's story stitched a pattern that led our heroes from rustic pastures to the foot of jagged mountains, where a clandestine lab carved into stone held secrets that could remake life, or snuff it out. As they climbed higher into the mist-wreathed peaks, each step carried the hum of unseen generators and the distant echo of containment alarms. It was at the mouth of a hidden canyon that they stumbled upon their next revelation. Research vehicles bearing a logo few outside a select few would recognize, the mark of a corporation believed defunct, its archives scorched in scandal years before. With hearts pounding, they advanced past the security perimeter to find cages once used for dinosaur testing, now empty and ominously open. A single strand of neon blue wire dangled from a cracked console, as though someone had fled in haste. But as the camera lifts above this reborn realm, capturing the slow march of ceratopsians across glistening plains, a final frame lingers on a single parapet of volcanic rock. There, the charred remains of a mercenary encampment smolder beneath a banner emblazoned with a stark promise: mastery or ruin. It flaps in the wind like a dark question posed to this fragile rebirth. Will humanity embrace stewardship, or will the siren call of Dominion resurface to sunder the fragile bonds of coexistence? In that lingering moment, our adventure surrenders its last secret, that the greatest twist lies not in the genetic marvels or the corporate machinations, but in the choice each soul must make when faced with the power to shape life itself. For in the land where giants walk again, the future hinges not on who controls the gene sequencer, but on whether the human heart can rise above its own shadow. As the screen fades, we are left poised at the brink of tomorrow, a story etched in dinosaur roar and human resolve, where the final chapter has yet to be written by those brave enough to live alongside the echoes of the past. The sun rose over a world forever altered, golden rays spilling across fields once quiet, now alive with thunderous footsteps. Our story unfolds in a countryside where the silhouettes of dinosaurs roam freely among rolling hills and winding country roads. Here, humanity has taken its first uncertain steps toward coexistence with creatures that once ruled the earth. In one tucked-away corner, a raptor, sleek, intelligent, and unmistakably aware, slipped through a farm gate under cover of morning mist, its keen eyes scanning barns and pastures as though seeking kin. It was in this world of fragile peace that two figures emerged, drawn together by both history and hope, a man whose life had been shaped by the bond he forged with that very species, and a woman whose fierce devotion to conservation had led her to dedicate every breath to protecting these reclaimed giants. Their reunion was not born of comfort but of necessity. Across the globe, whispers of chaos drifted on the wind, reports of viral outbreaks among livestock, of daring attacks on remote research outposts, and most alarming of all, of a shadowy organization moving in the dark corners of international politics to seize control of a new bioengineered weapon. In a sun-dappled forest clearing, the pair found themselves shoulder to shoulder once more, scanning the treetops for signs of danger. Leaves trembled at an unseen breath, and the distant cry of a pterosaur spiked the air with warning. Without exchange of word, they had too little time for pleasantries. They set off toward a hidden valley where the next clue to mankind's peril lay waiting. Along narrow dirt roads carved into rocky slopes, they encountered an unexpected discovery. A makeshift camp of survivalists who had chosen to shelter alongside triceratops herds grazing against sunset skies. The camp's leader, a wiry ex-military tracker, greeted them with wary eyes, revealing that he had witnessed genetically altered insects swarming through his crops, mutants whose sting carried a paralytic toxin encoded by the same rogue sequence rumored to animate a new breed of predator. His voice, rough as gravel, spoke of farmers falling ill overnight, of fields abandoned in the dark of panic. The man's story stitched a pattern that led our heroes from rustic pastures to the foot of jagged mountains, where a clandestine lab carved into stone held secrets that could remake life, or snuff it out. As they climbed higher into the mist-wreathed peaks, each step carried the hum of unseen generators and the distant echo of containment alarms. It was at the mouth of a hidden canyon that they stumbled upon their next revelation. Research vehicles bearing a logo few outside a select few would recognize, the mark of a corporation believed defunct, its archives scorched in scandal years before. With hearts pounding, They advanced past the security perimeter to find cages once used for dinosaur testing, now empty and ominously open. A single strand of neon blue wire dangled from a cracked console, as though someone had fled in haste, leaving behind the promise of either groundbreaking cure or catastrophic weapon. Within those cavernous steel halls, they flicked on a lone flickering light to find walls adorned with yellow hazard signs and hastily scrawled formulas. Every detail hinted at arcane flirtations with genetic code, experiments aimed at enhancing speed, aggression, even terrestrial adaptations for creatures meant to fly. Field notebooks lay strewn across a table, their pages stained with spilled coffee and darkened with frantic notations. Subject 47, aggressive behavior increased 200%. Subject 62, bone density unstable. The weight of each scribble pressed on their spines like a warning. The creatures they'd long fought to protect risked becoming instruments of human hubris, unscripted actors in a drama with no safety net. Their investigation was fractured by the sudden roar of engines outside, black SUVs tearing through the dust toward the lab's entrance. From the shadows, armed figures spilled forth, clad in tactical gear and bearing tranquilizer rifles modified for maximum lethality. In the ensuing chaos, our heroes scattered, the woman springing toward a row of locked gates to free a panicked stegosaurus herd, the man eyeing a service staircase that led toward the lab's lower levels. The trackers and survivalists they'd met joined the fray, driving armored ATVs to block the SUV's path and buying precious seconds for the release of dino captives who thundered past, bellowing into the haze. As night fell, they regrouped at a cliff's edge overlooking a valley lit by the glow of emergency flares. The earth trembled beneath the stampede of freed dinosaurs forging a new path through broken fences. In that charged moment, the trackers' eyes reflected both awe and terror, for the creatures they had liberated now carved their own destinies, heedless of the knife's edge upon which human survival teetered. Our heroes realized that they stood on the precipice of two revolutions, one of nature's unbound majesty and one of mankind's unspoken frailties. To secure a future where both could flourish, they would have to face not just the beasts in the fields, but the beasts lurking within the heart of human ambition. Guided by the trackers' star charts, maps hand-drawn from a lifetime in the wilderness, they traced a route down into fern-choked valleys, where an abandoned railway cut across an ancient forest floor. Here lay the heart of the conspiracy, a hidden rail line leading to an airstrip where cargo planes once ferried experimental subjects to clandestine buyers. The rails, buckled by root and ruin, still bore the scuff marks of heavy crates, evidence of monstrous cargo that vanished into the night sky. By torchlight, our protagonists followed the tracks toward a rusted switchyard, where a single freight car sat sealed with a biosafety lock. A single keycard, dangling from a bleached skull perched on a stake, provided the grim invitation to unlock truths better left buried. Inside the freight car, they discovered rows of reinforced crates, each bearing labels in multiple languages and blank spaces scrawled over with red marker, "Do not open, live biohazard." As the woman pried open the first crate, they found not reptiles this time, but towering moths, their wings spanning nearly 4 feet, veins thick as twine, and bodies smeared with flecks of bioluminescent spores that pulsed like epileptic stars. These giant insects twitched with unnatural vigor, their antennae curling toward intruders as though drawn by curiosity and hunger. The man's gut turned as he recognized the spore's molecular signature from the tracker's warning, a paralytic toxin fastened to each dust grain, engineered to turn every insect into a walking syringe. The realization struck like lightning. The conspiracy they chased was not merely about dinosaurs, but about reshaping every living thing to serve a singular, deadly purpose. Before they could act, floodlights stabbed through the darkness, and the whine of helicopters dived overhead. Armed forces poured into the switchyard, corralling the crates while officers barked orders into radios. In that instant, our heroes made their choice: to flee and save what they could, or to stand and expose the machinery of destruction. They escaped into the night, carrying with them samples of the spores and the raptor blueprints scribbled in the margins of a stolen binder, racing toward a network of allied scientists who might decipher the code and turn it against those who had written it. Dawn broke again with the promise of revelation. In a makeshift lab set within a secluded mountain lodge, they shared their findings with a team of geneticists and ethicists. Under the glow of microscopes, they watched the spore's needles unfurl, injecting cells with a venom that codified control. Maps strewn across the table marked test sites in the highlands and coastal jungles, places where these insects had already begun to emerge in the dead of night. The woman's voice, usually steady as a lighthouse beam, trembled as she insisted on containment protocols that skirted legal bounds. The man pressed a trembling hand to his forehead, the weight of every chase and every roar pressing down like a stone. Outside the lodge's windows, the mist curled around the pines like spectral fingers, and the faint call of an unknown creature echoed through the trees. It was a world poised on the brink, where every plan hinged on their next move. Could they intercept the spread of these engineered insects before an ecological cascade? Could they reforge the broken bonds between humans and prehistoric titans to stand sentinel against a new age of bio-warfare? As the light of morning met the jagged peaks, our heroes knew their journey had only just begun. The echoes of thunderous footsteps and the silent flutter of giant wings both beckoned them forward into a landscape reshaped by science, ambition, and the eternal promise of survival. Night draped itself across the landscape as our heroes emerged from the storm-lashed forest, the roar of waterfalls echoing like distant thunder. They carried the stolen biomaterials deep into a mist-shrouded valley, each footstep echoing the weight of destiny pressing upon their shoulders. Ahead lay the hidden aerodrome where the rogue syndicate's cargo planes waited, shadows of cold steel ready to ferry genetic nightmares into the wider world. Guided by the tracker's keen sixth sense, they crept through bracken and fern until they stood on a rocky outcrop, the runway stretching below them like a lifeline of hope and danger intertwined. Below, the syndicate's enforcers, clad in black tactical gear and armed with silenced rifles, patrolled between crates stamped with ominous biohazard symbols. A massive transport plane, its cargo door yawning open, lay at the far end, waiting to swallow crates full of spore-laced insects and vicious hybrid beasts. The paleobotanist, heart-pounding, signaled to her companion. Tonight, their heist would need more than stealth, it would need sacrifice. Creeping down the rocky slope, they found a side hatch in the plane's fuselage, its rusted hinges begging to be coaxed open. A whispered prayer, a splayed Swiss Army knife, and the hatch swung inward, revealing rows of sealed bio-containment units. With gloved precision, the tracker pried open the first crate to retrieve data drives and serum vials. Yet just as relief tinged their elation, spotlights snapped on, flooding the tarmac with blinding white blades of light. A tense standoff erupted, guards shouting orders, guns leveled, and a drone of rotors overhead hinting at reinforcements. In that razor-thin moment, it fell upon the veteran tracker to create a diversion. With a single burst from a makeshift EMP pistol, he blacked out the plane's electronics, plunging the area into near darkness. Sirens wailed as alarms triggered, but the blackout disrupted comm links, sowing confusion. The paleobotanist seized the opportunity to carry out the biomaterials toward the treeline as the tracker covered their retreat. They raced through a gauntlet of searchlights and barking dogs, branches whipping at their faces, until they reached a relic of a monorail tunnel carved into a hillside. There, breath ragged, they met their allies, the ex-military survivalists and a squad of paleoconservationists armed with tranquilizer rifles. Together, they formed a protective ring. But victory proved fleeting. The ground trembled with the thunderous approach of a T-Rex, awakened by the EMP's rumble, and not the tertiary population they called gentle giants, but a brutal new specimen marked by iridescent scales and razor spines hinting at hybrid enhancements. Its roar shattered the night as it charged, a living battering ram that crushed searchlight poles where it passed. Amid the chaos, the paleobotanist remembered the antidote serum tucked in her belt, her final gambit. As the monster lunged, she ran toward it, courage alight in her eyes, and plunged a syringe into its flank. The creature staggered as glowing antidote coursed through its veins, its roar morphing into a pained bellow. In that crucible of sound and shadow, the tracker fired a tranquilizer dart, and the beast collapsed in a shuddering heap. The group breathed a collective sigh, but the war was far from over. This confrontation had exposed them, alerted the syndicate's entire network. Dawn found them holed up in an abandoned Quonset hut, walls draped in cracked tarps and brittle vines. They pored over the stolen data drives, watching streams of code and genetic sequences that spelled out an even darker design. Not just rogue insects, but a blueprint for resurrected species from every era, all mangled by human meddling. Their enemy's vision was nothing short of ecological dominion, spoils of genetic engineering to be bought and sold like livestock, primal creatures bred for profit, spectacle, and war. Staring at this digital tapestry of hubris, the paleobotanist whispered that the only way to stop this open Pandora's box was to root out the heart of the operation, the fortified Spice Island fortress in the Mediterranean where the mastermind awaited. Their plan formed in fevered detail: infiltrate the island under cover of night, disable its cloaked lab complex, and confront the shadowy architect of this bio-apocalypse. With a stolen helicopter piloted by the surviving chopper pilot from their first encounter, they flew across the star-scattered sea, the island's craggy silhouette rising like a leviathan from the black waters. Touching down on a narrow beach, they slipped ashore beneath a canopy of palm fronds, their only guide the low glow of phosphorescent algae trailing in the surf. Every footstep on the sand carried the weight of their calling, to bare-knuckle wrest the reins of creation from those who would unleash it upon the world. They slipped through barbed wire defenses, ducking under floodlights that painted the lush foliage in harsh white strokes. Moving as shadows, the team reached the perimeter of a sterile lab complex perched at the cliff's edge. There, guards in tactical exoskeletons paced like caged animals, their faces hidden behind black visors. Using a sequence of digital code stolen from the data drives, the hacker among them deactivated security cameras in a domino of pixelated darkness. Doors swished open at a whispered command, and they infiltrated the compound's labyrinthine corridors. Inside, the corridors hummed with the pulsing glow of incubation vats. Each tank held specimens in suspended animation, cells swelling, DNA unraveling, potential predators awaiting activation. With trembling hands, the paleobotanist activated an override on the central console, initiating a complete system meltdown. Alarms shrieked as temperatures soared, glass walls cracked, and steam flared. Guards flooded the hallways in a tide of bullets and ballistic shields. A pitched firefight erupted, tranquilizer darts flying, gunfire clashing against reinforced doors. Amid the turmoil, the tracker and the veteran survivors battled their way toward a raised walkway where the facility's head geneticist stood, calm, immaculate in a lab coat, his hands stained with inked notations. He revealed himself as the late heir of a powerful dynastic family whose fortune had funded the park's original resurrection. His vision had never been preservation but ascendancy, to wield genetic power as the ultimate kingmaker. He raised a silenced pistol to the paleobotanist's heart, but in that split second, the tracker hurled a wrench, knocking the weapon aside. They tumbled into the walkway railings as the floor's crossbow-like security shutters slammed shut behind them. The geneticist sneered that their efforts had been futile, gesturing to the rupturing vats releasing a toxic fog laced with engineered spores. This was his legacy, to remake life in a brutal, Darwinian crucible. As he turned to throttle a final command into the console, the paleobotanist lunged for the override module she had plugged into her belt. With frantic fingers, she forced a system-wide purge, sending code into a feedback loop. The vats charged with glowing toxins flickered and died, the building shuddered as power systems overloaded and emergency protocols snapped in. In the facility's belly, the implosion reached a crescendo. The corridors buckled, water pipes exploded, and the team sprinted toward an emergency exit. A pack of freed theropods, once destined for illicit experiments, burst from inner cages, their roars mingling with collapsing walls. In the chaos, the tracker guided the paleobotanist down a spiral staircase as concrete slabs fell around them. They emerged onto the cliff's jagged rocks just as the lab erupted in flames, its laboratories collapsing into the sea below like a monument to hubris self-destructing. The mastermind stood at the cliff's brink, clutching a satchel of vials, the last vestige of his genetic arsenal. In a roar of triumph, he hurled the satchel into the inferno, muttering that its contents would become the bedrock of evolution's next leap. But as the storm-tossed sea below answered with a thunderous wave, the satchel plummeted into the churning depths, its potential lost in the dark swirl of water and fire. Silence fell with the weight of absolution as the facility's fiery remains flickered against the moonlit sky. The freed dinosaurs, drawn by the conflagration's glow, roamed the ruined grounds, their shadows cast long like sentinels of a new dawn. The paleobotanist and tracker, bruised and bloodied, stood amid the scorched ashes, knowing that the world would awaken to uncertainty once more. But they had broken the chain of manipulation, scattering the coded seeds of tyranny into oblivion. As dawn's first light painted the horizon in soft rose, they watched as the helicopter, now silhouetted against a pastel sky, rose into the firmament. Aboard, the surviving allies regrouped, their faces etched with relief and resolve. They vowed to shepherd the dinosaurs and humans they had fought so fiercely to free, to build a future in which both could thrive without the specter of exploitation. And as they flew homeward across the glassy sea, the tracker whispered that hope, like the creatures they protected, must be wild and free, untamed by the hands that would seek to wield it as a weapon. Thus, in the aftermath of calamity and heroism, the world stood on a knife's edge between destruction and renaissance. The second half of their odyssey had unraveled the darkest schemes of ambition and steered the fate of life itself back toward choice. And though the path ahead remained fraught with uncertainty, the bonds forged in fire and flight now shimmered with the promise of a new chapter, one written not in napalm and cages, but in shared wildness and the fragile grace of coexistence. He first appeared under steel-gray skies, boots sloshing through a flooded paddock where water lilies bobbed like emerald eyes. Owen Grady's shoulders were squared against the chill, the familiar hum of sprinting raptors echoing in his chest like a second heartbeat. Years had passed since he first etched bonds of trust in those enclosures, years marked by betrayals both human and animal. Now, as he rifled through damp hay for traces of a raptor's fluorescent tag, those bonds weighed on him like living chains. Each rustle of straw reminded him of days spent teaching the creatures to respect the line between predator and partner, of nights when he lay awake listening for the click-click-click of claws on fencing. In his gaze flickered the resolve of a man who had stared into the mouth of bare tooth and found not destruction, but a companion's recognition. His hands, calloused from leash handling and door-resistant toggles, moved with gentle precision, a silent promise that he would protect each scaled soul with the fierce loyalty that once bound him to Blue. She, in turn, felt the echo of his presence before he rounded the corner. The air shivered as Blue's amber eyes opened, scanning the shoreline for him, nostrils flaring in a breath that tasted of ozone and dawn. When she rose on slender legs, her head tilted slightly, she offered a glimpse of creature intellect so profound it trembled the air between them. In that tilt lay an unspoken dialogue, the years of flight drills beneath his whistle, the taste of raw meat handed in careful ceremony. In her gaze lay both feral hunger and tempered trust, a dichotomy carved by Owen's hand in training rings and mud-slick pens. Their symbiosis was more than man and creature. It was an echo of a primal pact renewed in each shared sunrise, each urgent sprint across re-wilded fields. Across the paddock's muddy troughs, Claire Deering moved with a different grace, sartorial elegance incongruous amid soaked earth and tangled reeds. Her days of corporate heels had given way to rubber-soled pragmatism, and yet in the lean set of her shoulders, the polish of her earlier life still gleamed. Her mind, once a steel trap for spreadsheets and boardroom strategy, now spun on the axis of biodiversity and ethical stewardship. When she knelt to examine a broken fence post, her fingers brushed an imprint left by massive claws, an imprint that mapped not only the creature's weight but the dangerous compromise between containment and cohabitation. Every frayed rope and sagging beam bore testimony to her transformation, from executive enforcing profits to champion nurturing coexistence. In her eyes flickered the remnants of her former self, precise, analytical, but now illumined by fierce compassion and conviction that humanity's future would be measured in every repaired fence and every spared life. Between Owen and Claire stood Maisie Lockwood, the child of impossible biology, her dark curls tied back in a ponytail that tipped with ink-stained lists of genomes and code. Her hands, dancing across a compact tablet, coaxed viral sequences into subservience, unraveling strands that danced with the memory of extinct lineages. Born of transgenic ingenuity, she carried within her the spark of the very experiments that had rewritten life's script, her blood a testament to humankind's audacity to steal from extinction's vault. Yet within her chest beat the heart of a girl raised on farmhouse lunches and lullabies about dinosaurs, instilling in her a reverence for the world's lost marvels. In her wide, curious gaze lay both wonder at her own provenance and the heavy burden of living code, each breath a strand of DNA borrowed from worlds before ours. In her small frame pulsed the hope that creation could be guided by conscience. When she touched her forearm, her fingers found the faint sculpt of a genetic scar hidden beneath pale skin, a scar that once separated her from the world. Here was symbolism writ across flesh, the margin where science wove its tapestry into humanity's loom. In her expressions, quivering beneath smiles, flickered that trembling balance between childlike innocence and the grown-up horrors she glimpsed in lab archives at midnight. Maisie's wounds, both seen and unseen, stitched together the narrative of every parental sacrifice and every moral compromise made to yield a daughter of science, and beyond her, a world forever altered. Hidden behind magnified rings of plexiglass, Dr. Henry Wu's gaze flickered with twin currents of ambition and doubt. He stood before an observation window, arms folded over a lab coat stained by gel electrophoresis, watching as cultured cells churned beneath lamplight. Each petri dish housed microscopic worlds, the genetic seeds of tomorrow's chimera. In his heart lay the fire of a pioneer, thirst for discovery that coursed through his veins like molten gold. Yet within that same furnace flickered the ashes of regret, memories of creatures unleashed, experiments gone awry, the roar of teeth meeting flesh in the night. He had once believed in the purity of knowledge, sequestered from prophet's glare. But the corridors had twisted his vision, and now every coded sequence he orchestrated echoed with the ghosts of failures. Denver's nursing child entwined with predatory genes, the headlines that once branded him visionary and monster in the same breath. In one trembling moment, he pressed a hand to the glass, watching raptors prowl across a synthetic turf below. Their sinewy grace, born of living flesh and painstaking training, mirrored the sleek potential of his creations. Yet each footstep their claws gouged into the turf felt like a rebuke, nature's artistry beyond any splice he had engineered. When he returned to the analysis terminal, his fingers hovered over the keyboard. Should he deposit these vectors into safe vaults, or continue the holy pursuit of genetic mastery? The answer trembled in his chest like a suppressed heartbeat. High on the cliffs overlooking the churning sea, Louis Dodgson, the corporate puppeteer whose name barely whispered through legal disclaimers, surveyed his fiefdom of fossil and data with a predator's smiled gleam. His suit pressed so perfectly it seemed woven from ambition itself. Silk tie patterned with DNA helixes swayed behind him in the cold wind. In his palm lay a dossier of global permits, blackmailed politicians, and stock options earned by courting the edge of extinction. In one slender finger he rubbed the grainy photograph of Maisie's arm, the future unlocked as property, gene therapy coded into a commodity. His lean lips twitched. Power lay in manipulating life's thread, and through it he would orchestrate the final piano of commerce. His view stretched from the rolling peaks to the watery horizon, where each spindrift wave carried a promise of hidden lab islands beyond government's reach. He saw in the horizon not freedom but opportunity, untold markets awaiting the greedy dance of chemical interventions. When Dodgson withdrew into his cliffside office, the lights dimmed to emerald gloom. Petri dishes flickered beneath UV lamps like alien constellations, and inside him paralleled the hum of incubators, plans undulating in darkness. In his reflection, cloaked by glass, he saw the reflection of a man unbound by conscience, determined to weave biology into profit. On the fringes of the island, Kayla Watts, ex-jungle guide turned eco-activist, moved through the mangroves with cat-like grace. Mud squelched under her boots while tidewater lapped at her ankles, drawing ghostly lines across damp fabric. In her left hand she clutched a weathered journal, the pages filled with indigenous legends of dinosaur-shaped spirits guarding forests. She believed that creatures were not mere DNA constructs but the living avatars of ancestral wrath. In each bark scraped by shifting roots and each shriek from treetops, she read the island's pulse. Eyes alight, she mapped the hidden waterways the raptors used to bypass human settlements. knowledge earned through whispered prayers and midnight vigils by firelight. In her heart marched the footsteps of ancestors who honored the land. In her voice resonated the hush of dawn rituals meant to appease the giant spirits reborn. When she listened to the map paddled past mangrove crowns, phantom aquatic dinosaurs brushing beneath canoe hulls, she foresaw two paths, one where kinship with these saltwater behemoths could forge a new covenant, and one where human folly would shatter the tenuous harmony they had built. In her reflection on brackish water, she saw a warrior for ecological justice, one who judged mankind not by laws but by the scars left on the living earth. As these characters converged on the island's volcano ring roads, Owen and Blue forging a path along a cracked fire road, Claire rallying government envoys with Maisie's digital sequences, Wu locked in moral quarantine, Dodgson summoned to global briefing rooms, and Kayla paddling toward forbidden coves, their arcs knotted into a tapestry of hope and hubris. Each character bore the scars of choices that tethered them to the island's fate. Owen's trust earned in flare-lit training arenas, Claire's compassion tempered by whiplashed corporate pragmatism, Maisie's borrowed braid of life and code, Wu's unsteady soul lodged between discovery and regret, Dodgson's ambition sharpened by modern alchemy, and Kayla's ancestral vow reverberating beneath each wave. Owen's trust earned in flare-lit training arenas, Claire's compassion tempered by whiplashed corporate pragmatism, Maisie's borrowed braid of life and code, Wu's unsteady soul lodged between discovery and regret, Dodgson's ambition sharpened by modern alchemy, and Kayla's ancestral vow reverberating beneath each wave. Their stories, when woven together beneath the island's blood-red sky, formed a living mosaic. Humanity at a crossroads where claws met conscience, DNA danced with destiny, and every heartbeat could tip the scales. In the end, the island would not judge them by their titles, but by the echoes of their choices cast into the primordial forests where thunderous footsteps still announced life's enduring roar. A silver haze clung to the early morning mist as the first trucks rolled onto the backlit, an unassuming stretch of red dirt nestled behind a suburban soundstage, soon to be reborn as the verdant hills of Europe, the scorched sands of the Sahara, and the storm-lashed cliffs of an island shrouded in secret. The air tasted of diesel and dew, and crew members shuffled to call times with dog-eared production schedules, each page flecked with coffee stains and last-minute rewrites. Few could have guessed that this ordinary morning would give rise to some of the most peculiar legends in franchise history. To begin with, there was the day the animatronic T-Rex, nicknamed Gracie by her caretakers, wandered off her tracks. The massive steel and foam puppet, parked overnight in a fenced enclosure, had been left with only the dim glow of battery-powered lights. At precisely 3:17 a.m., security cameras caught a maintenance worker, half asleep, criminally forgetful of the hydraulic locks, wandering off to fetch coffee. In that pause, Gracie's systems rebooted on a phantom signal, and she eased forward, one padded foot at a time, her tail swaying like a pendulum of peril. By the time the crew arrived in the morning, she stood inches from the craft services trailer, sniffing at abandoned bagels. Those who witnessed it swore they heard a low, mechanical growl of curiosity. No one was hurt, but the incident earned her a permanent guard dog, an actual sheepdog named Baxter with a penchant for chasing stray pigeons. Meanwhile, on the Moroccan desert location doubling for Oman's empty expanse, the production faced a more elemental oddity. During the Great Locust Swarm sequence, created with practical effects using thousands of dried mealworms released by hand, an actual colony of locusts, perhaps bored by the constant drone of drones, descended in the night. Crew members awoke to trillions of tiny wings rustling across every surface, coats, and tent flap. The special effects team, initially elated at their authentic invasion, soon realized their mistake when the real locusts feasted on the mealworm bait and then on the shade tarps, chewing them into confetti. They packed up at dawn, the war ebb of the natural migration now a cautionary tale on why real insects and film insects must remain separate. On the misty Scottish island doubling for the dense jungles of Sicily, the cinematographers discovered that their pristine lenses, coveted Zeiss superspeeds, had been coated with an invisible sheen of raptor saliva. During an earlier canopy shoot, the trained velociraptors, guided by wranglers within the trees, had been allowed to approach too closely. A single lick from one gleaming snout was enough to leave microscopic proteins that, under theater lights, caused lens flares that looked like spectral dinosaur eyes drifting across the screen. The crew spent an entire week cleaning every glass surface with nitrogreen solvent, but the legend persists that the velociraptor spirit lives on in those unintended flares, little phantasms that appear when you least expect them. Perhaps no creature on the set inspired more whispered lore than the cantankerous Gilly, a juvenile dimorphodon whose wingspan had been meticulously crafted by Stan Winston Studios. She had been trained to circle above the hero characters during their jungle escape, but every time the cameras rolled, she would lunge straight for the craft services table, mistaking banana muffins for her favorite treats. The gaffers rigged an invisible line to gently steer her away, but one memorable afternoon, she managed to carry off an entire tray of bacon and egg croissants. The director, chasing her with a megaphone, declared it the greatest bird theft ever caught on camera. Gilly's misbehavior earned her a starring cameo in the blooper reel, where her muffled croissant chomping accompanied John's primal scream. Up in the Alps, where the team shot the high-altitude rescue sequence, mountaineers were hired to guide cast and crew up sheer faces. One second-unit cameraman, haughty in his Hollywood harness, scoffed at local lore that the mountain housed a stone eater, a mythical creature said to swallow pebbles and spit out polished crystals. When he found a small pile of gleaming rock on a narrow ledge during a break, he pocketed them as lucky tokens. That evening, coughing violently in his hotel room, he dreamt of being crushed beneath a rolling boulder. Waking in a sweat, he realized the crystals were actually conglomerates of quartz and iron ore, known locally to induce respiratory irritation if ground into dust and inhaled. He returned them to the mountain at dawn, apologizing to the locals for disturbing the stone eater's stash, and never scoffed at superstition again. Inside the soundstage, where the gyroscopically stabilized gimbal rig was tested for the climactic chase, technicians added frictionless bearings claiming to make the camera hover like a pterosaur. Apparently, they over-lubricated. On the first full-motion rehearsal, the entire dolly system lurched of its rails, careening into a set of expensive Da Vinci rotating platforms, crushing faux palm saplings and sending puffed foam fronds into the air. The resulting scene looked so dramatic that the next day, the director insisted on filming the collision live, weaving it into the city under siege sequence. Thus was born the tradition of accidental blockbuster B-roll, a reminder that some of the most spectacular moments happen when engineering meets serendipity. The crafting of the film's super-high CGI scene, where the T-Rex, Velociraptor, and other dinosaurs finally converge in an epic circle, relied on motion capture suits coated in tracking dots. While choreographing the Velociraptor dancers, one performer's suit leaked adhesive gel into his shoes, causing every step to echo like a tap dancer in soaked felt. The tech team, convinced it was a rig malfunction, triple-checked their software until they realized it was merely an overzealous use of industrial-grade gel. They left the echoes in the final mix, dubbing them Rattle Raptor, a rhythmic percussion that unintentionally became a fan favorite in test screenings, inspiring memes and remixes that paired raptor roars with hip-hop beats. On the day they filmed the underwater river chase, stunt coordinator Joe "Sharkfin" Silva insisted on using heated water to protect the actors from hypothermia, especially during multiple retakes. But someone miscalibrated the heater, and the water approached bathtub temperature. When the Velociraptor animatronic head, hoisted on cables, dipped underwater, it steamed like a living geyser, creating plumes of vapor that looked virtually impossible to achieve in post-production. The VFX team tried to replicate the effect digitally for months, but eventually conceded that the Rayol steam gave an irreplaceable sense of immediacy. Today, that swirling mist remains one of the film's most mysterious visual touches, so convincing that viewers are convinced it had to have been CGI. Few anecdotes circulated as widely as the one from the first day of shooting in the African savanna, where blank-firing Tran-Q rifles loaded with loud but harmless rounds were used to simulate a raptor hunt. On a routine take, a herd of zebra dashed across the frame, startled by the gunshots. In the chaos, a single zebra foal sprinted straight between the raptor's pen and the filming crew, pausing for a breathless second in full view of the lens. The actors, thinking it part of the scene, improvised a line, "Nature always finds a way," which the director loved so much he kept in the final cut. The foal's cameo, unplanned and fleeting, became a symbol of life's unstoppable will to endure, even amid human spectacle. For the principal actors, the strangest story involved production Dr. Michelle Clark, who insisted that certain dinosaur audio cues, specifically the low, subsonic growl of a sauropod herd, had to be played on set, not added later. She claimed the frequencies, inaudible to the human ear, had a subtle calming effect on both cast and live raptors, keeping tempers from flaring on long shooting days. Actors swore they felt the ground vibrate in their chests whenever the subsonic speakers fired up, a sensation akin to standing atop a subway grating while a train rumbled by. Though skeptics called it placebo, the presence of subsonic rumbles soon became standard kit in motion picture zoos, a curious legacy of this film's ephemeral symphony. As night fell on the remote Indonesian jungle set, the art department's campfire scene fell victim to an even more uncanny occurrence. Every single helium lantern, meant to bob above the planned campsite at eye level, deflated of its own accord just before filming. Technicians retrieved punctured lanterns, only to find minuscule bite marks consistent with fruit bat incisors. Local guides, mystified, blamed a colony of megabats with a taste for luminous balloons. Rather than delay, the crew improvised, shooting the scene by lantern-lit flashlights and oil lamps, giving the sequence a primal, flickering intimacy unmatched by the original lighting plan. Late in the shoot, the VFX department discovered that one key shot, featuring a volcanic eruption mirroring the dinosaurs' exodus from an island, had been filmed with the wrong aspect ratio. Rather than reshoot on location, they pioneered a technique called layered anamorphosis, digitally stretching certain areas and collapsing others, so the final frame preserved the intended 2.39:1 scope without losing the actors' performances. This accidental breakthrough spread across the industry, becoming a secret weapon for directors facing framing disasters. They nicknamed it Dominion warping, after the film that first forced a workaround for a seemingly catastrophic mistake. Finally, at the world premiere gala held beneath a giant inflatable pteranodon, cast and crew exchanged stories of their favorite mishaps. One makeup artist recalled how the faux dinosaur blood, mixed from corn syrup, dye, and paprika, began fermenting under heat lamps, turning pungent and partially carbonated. When spilled on set, it spewed bubbles that looks like errant dinosaurs' breath. Months later, eager fans mistook the effervescent droplets for an intentional living blood effect, igniting online theories about biomimetic special effects. The truth, simply a spoiled recipe, became part of the film's curious mythology. And so, 20 years later, the strangest facts about the making of this chapter in dinosaur lore still echo like a half-remembered roar. From runaway T-Rex's rifling food trucks to accidental subsonic therapy sessions, from helium-draining megabats to lens-licking raptors, each tale underscores one immutable truth. When you resurrect icons of a vanished world, expect the unexpected. In the fragile liminal space where filmmaking meets feline unpredictability, magic emerges in the mistakes, wonder lurks in the misfires, and the legend of these dinosaurs, both on screen and behind the scenes, roars on. The screen fades in on the wreckage of an island volcano, its blackened slopes still smoldering beneath leaden skies. A single Tyrannosaurus rex emerges from the haze, its massive feet crunching through ash as the wind whips molten rain across charred ferns. In that moment, the film bores through its greatest strength. It refuses to shy from the elemental power of nature run amok, a force as jagged and unpredictable as any human folly. Critics and audiences alike found themselves drawn in by this brutal, stunning spectacle, the apex predator reborn against a backdrop of raw, volcanic fury, and in that rebirth lay the film's first great critical battleground. Did the sequence serve only as eye candy, or did it underscore a deeper thematic reckoning with human hubris? Those who championed the scene noted how the eruption's violence crystallized the film's insistence that humanity's creations, dinosaur or device, ultimately bend to the same primeval forces that shaped Earth's history. In reviews, celebrated critic Elena Marks wrote, "The opening eruption isn't mere spectacle, but a brilliant metaphor, the planet itself demanding accountability for tampering with life's blueprint." She argued that the film's willingness to open on such a savage display signaled its ambition to operate on mythic levels, echoing ancient creation epics where gods unleash tempests to punish mortal transgression. Detractors, however, saw the sequence as overlong, questioning whether 3 minutes of rumbling ash and lava flows merely delayed the narrative's true pulse, the human drama unfolding in sterilized labs and jungle hideouts. Yet even these skeptics conceded that the sequence set a visceral tone no screenwriter's page could match, grounding the subsequent moral conflicts in a world that still answers to elemental laws. From that volcanic crucible, the film hurtles into its next pivotal event, the audacious infiltration of the clandestine biotech facility hidden beneath the Sierra's mist-cloaked peaks. Here, our protagonists, led by the steely paleobotanist Dr. Lena Moreau and renegade tracker Jonah Ruiz, reveal the syndicate's horrific experiments, splicing predatory genes into insects to create living biochemical weapons. The resonance of this sequence stems from the stark juxtaposition of pristine lab corridors and cages of thrashing hybrids. Critics lauded the filmmaker's deft intercutting of clinical calm and bestial violence, praising editor Maya Blitz's rhythmic pacing that ratchets tension like a tightening vice. The scene's emotional core hinges on the moment Moreau witnesses a mutated mosquito larva drilling through flesh-simulating tissue, a sight so harrowing that the supporting character's subsequent breakdown becomes irresistibly human. As scholar Theo Renard observed in Cinema Journal, in these few minutes, the film crystallizes its warning. The veneer of scientific progress easily masks a descent into barbarity. In theaters, audiences responded with fervor. Social media buzzed with theories on the film's moral core, debates over its most harrowing moments, and widespread praise for its technical daring. Box office analysts noted that despite mixed appraisals of certain character arcs, ticket sales soared. The film became a lightning rod for conversation about science, stewardship, and the power of spectacle to illuminate ethical fault lines. Panelists at genre festivals dissected every set piece, from the volcanic eruption's digital pyrotechnics to the grinder of concrete corridor collapses, marveling at how practical effects and CGI fused seamlessly to serve narrative weight. In retrospect, the movie's critical legacy centers on its willingness to harness blockbuster apparatus in service of urgent questions. What price will we pay for playing God? Can wonder survive once we unravel nature's code? And in a world where no fate feels like an empty promise, can we grant ourselves the second chance found in cooperation with the wild rather than dominion over it? 2 years on, the film remains a lodestone for debates on cinematic scope and moral scope alike, a rare achievement that startled, provoked, and ultimately awoke audiences to the perils and possibilities etched in every frame. Thus, from the first roar of volcanic fire to the final hush of electromagnetic dawn, this chapter in dinosaur lore transcended its thrilling set pieces to stake a claim in the cultural zeitgeist. Its key events, the clandestine lab raid, betrayal atop a swaying bridge, the swarm of deadly beetles, the sanctuary's fleeting grace, and the EMP's sobering ripple, each contributed to a mosaic of impact, shaping both the film's reception and its ever-evolving myth. In the end, it reminded us that cinema's greatest power lies not in its illusions, but in the truths they reveal, that survival demands both awe and accountability, and that even the mightiest creatures, titanic or tiny, must answer to the fragile code of coexistence. The first light of dawn had barely kissed the peaks of Iceland's volcanic highlands when the initial scouting party touched down. They stepped from a chartered helicopter into a landscape that seemed torn from primordial dreams. Black sand dunes stretched to roiling blue waters, steam curtains drifted from jagged fissures, and moss-covered lava fields sprawled like living carpets. It was here, in this austere grandeur, that the filmmakers sought the raw essence of the world's primeval past. Few expected that a single geothermic vent would deliver the day's first delight. An Icelandic farmer who insisted on offering them fresh skyr and rye bread, convinced they were filming a nature documentary. His bemused expression as cameras rolled past steamy geysers presaged the curious blend of high art and humble serendipity that would color the entire production. Inside a repurposed dairy barn, now converted into a makeshift props workshop, sculptors at Stan Winston Studio labored over giant foam molds destined to become the gargantuan frames of long-necked behemoths. One afternoon, a wayward drill bit snapped free and embedded itself into a half-finished mold, only to be discovered later, perfectly aligned with a leaf-shaped indentation. The effect was so lifelike, resembling a dinosaur claw print, that the sculptors chose to leave it in place. When audiences caught that subtle curve on opening night, Few realized it was a serendipitous accident born of craftsmanship and calamity. By midday, the special effects crews arrived with crates of pneumatic pistons and articulation rigs. They spent hours balancing hydraulic pressure to achieve the precise pulsation of a living lung beneath an animatronic pterosaur's chest. On the day of the first test, the rig lurched to life, its wings flexing in a slow, dignified arc, until a stray gust of wind swept across the lot, tipping the entire contraption into a row of parked catering vans. The resulting collision left a line of crumpled metal and spilled rice pilaf. Rather than scrap the footage, the director realized it conveyed an unplanned sense of mass and inertia, and included the brief clip in a behind-the-scenes featurette. When cameras rolled on the Swiss Alps to depict the perilous high cliff rescue, safety harnesses and cables spanned the rocky faces. But plummeting temperatures one morning coated the cables in a thin sheen of ice, unbeknownst to the crew. A stunt coordinator, trudging ahead to secure a camera platform, discovered that his grappling hook had slipped free when he found himself suspended 15 feet above a yawning crevasse. He managed to swing himself to a nearby outcropping, his heart pounding, his grip secure, but for days afterward, the grips weaved padded cables and friction belts into the ropes. The incident became a cautionary tale of human vulnerability in the face of beauty's icy allure. Deep in the Moroccan desert, where the Sahara dunes stood in for the Sahara's imagined perils, the production erected a sprawling set of an abandoned petrol station reclaimed by drifting sands. Art directors spent weeks aging rusted fuel pumps and weathering signage to evoke decades of desolation. On the very first burnt-in shot, a genuine sandstorm whipped across the lot, buried half the set in gold dust, and forced the crew to wait out an entire day beneath canvas tents. One cinematographer, camera mounted on a dune buggy, accidentally captured a herd of real camels weaving across the horizon, a shot so poetic that the director rewrote the scene to include a cavalcade of beasts emerging as silhouettes against sunset dunes. Inside the soundstage in Toronto, where the subterranean lab sequences were shot, the set's designers installed hundreds of LED tubes in the ceiling to simulate the flicker of a failing power grid. Yet during a late-night heat wave, the tubes began to overheat, humming with a disconcerting resonance that sent small droplets of condensation arcing like sparks. Crew members joked that the set had developed a heartbeat of its own. The sound mixers recorded that hum and repurposed it in post-production as the pulsing ambience beneath the villain's command center, a subtle cue that technology itself had become alive. When the time came to film the volcanic eruption that heralded the arrival of genetically resurrected beasts, the visual effects team built miniature volcanoes on a massive gimbal, coating them with petroleum jelly and powdered pigment to achieve the right viscosity of lava. In one test, a stray spark ignited a nearby fuel drum, sending flames shooting skyward like a man-made inferno. Fire safety crews arrived to douse the blaze, barely containing what could have become a Hollywood inferno. But the captured footage, shots of roiling fiery plumes, ended up in the film's teaser trailer, promising cataclysm on a scale that only a rogue blender of practical and digital effects could deliver. On the lush sets of the sanctuary sequence, where herds of giant dinosaurs grazed beneath glass-domed aviaries, botanical artists struggled to keep fiddlehead ferns lush under the intense heat of spotlights. They built automated misting rigs that cycled every 2 hours, but algae quickly flourished on every leaf, turning them a sickly gray. A resourceful plant wrangler suggested wiping each leaf with a diluted milk solution, whose lactic acid gently cleansed the algae. Though unconventional, the method worked so well that the sanctuary's foliage glowed with unearthly vibrancy, each shot radiating life like a painting in chiaroscuro. Yet the sequence's impact hinged not only on on-screen action but on sound design's chilling precision. Supervising sound editor Aria Choi crafted a layered audio tapestry, mechanical hums of autoclaves giving way to the soft, wet rasp of PVC flesh, then punctuated by the distant echo of cicadas, a reminder that nature's chorus has been commandeered into a sinister symphony. The result, noted by numerous reviewers, was an immersive assault on the senses that left audiences reeling in theaters, a vivid demonstration of how audio engineering can deepen thematic resonance. Its success became a case study in fusing practical effects with haunting soundscapes to evoke moral revulsion without resorting to gratuitous gore. As the film's middle act unfolds, A seemingly straightforward rescue mission atop a rickety monorail bridge transforms into a crucible of betrayal when corporate liaison Dr. Evelyn Carrington reveals her true allegiance. In the sun-dappled canopy, the bridge's creaking planks scrape beneath the feet of our heroes, the chasm yawning below like the maw of an awakening leviathan. Critics pointed to this moment as the film's first major twist, an unexpected reversal that reframes every preceding scene. Carrington's betrayal, they argued, spoke to the insidious nature of power structures, where the pursuit of profit corrodes ethical boundaries. Some commentators, however, found her unmasking contrived, a by-the-numbers espionage beat amid a story otherwise grounded in natural wonder. Yet even they conceded that her turn injected fresh narrative torque, forcing characters and viewers to question every alliance in a world where survival demands both caution and courage. This twisting of loyalties on a crumbling bridge mirrored the film's broader interrogation of trust, a theme that rippled through the emotional core. When the tracker Jonah catches sight of Moreau dangling over the chasm, her fingers slipping from the rail, his desperate plea reverberates, "I won't lose you again." In that raw, stammered confession lay the story's quiet heart. In a world reshaped by monsters of our own making, the bonds between individuals become both refuge and weapon. Critics praised actress Marisol Vázquez's performance in those fleeting seconds, declaring it a standout moment of vulnerability in a tense action spectacle. As one review in The Guardian put it, "Her fear is our fear, a reminder that even the boldest hearts quail at the precipice." While human drama churned atop that bridge, the film's next major beat shredded the illusion of human control, the synchronized outbreak of genetically enhanced tyrant beetles across multiple continents. A specially coordinated sequence cuts from the beaches of Spain to the rice paddies of Vietnam, each locale invaded by swarms carrying engineered toxins. The documentary-style intercuts, complete with on-screen timestamps and international news tickers, earned praise for global scale and editorial audacity. Observers celebrated the sequence's ambition, likening it to the first wave of a viral pandemic, an uncanny parallel to real-world anxieties. Its resonance proved so potent that the film's marketing team even repurposed international news footage in teaser trailers, blurring the line between fiction and lived dread. Yet some critics argued this stretch veered too close to sensationalism, sacrificing character moments in favor of spectacle. In response, director Elena Shore defended the choice, asserting that grandeur was essential to convey the full measure of catastrophe unleashed when science runs amok. Following the outbreak, the film's heart-rending centerpiece emerges, the sanctuary of the wild, where a hidden valley shelters flourished herds of ancient creatures. The camera, in a single unbroken crane shot, sweeps over ceratopsians grazing beneath dawn's golden light, their breath misting in crisp air. This prolonged take, unrelieved by cuts, became an instant critical darling for its lyricism and technical daring. Critics lauded cinematographer Raj Patel's use of an ultra-wide lens and subtle drone support to craft a sense of expansive tranquility, a counterpoint to the preceding chaos. The sequence's emotional resonance lay in its affirmation of wonder. Amid pandemics and betrayals, life endures in silent, dignified forms. As noted in a glowing Variety profile, this shot captures the sublime promise of renewal that pulses at the movie's core. But paradise proves fragile. In a gut-punching twist, it becomes the site of one of cinema's most unexpected character deaths. Kayla Watts, the island's eco-guardian, perishes defending hatchlings from poachers masked as recyclers. The sequence, Kayla lashing out with improvised weapons, her final stand beneath the crash of helicopters, unleashed a maelstrom of emotion. Critics were divided. Some condemned the decision as gratuitous, arguing that sacrificing a character so beloved conveyed nihilistic sentiment. Others, however, praised it as a bold refusal to spare even the pure-hearted, underscoring the film's thesis that real-world stakes carry real-world costs. In the weeks following release, think pieces grappled with Kayla's fall, its ripple effect on the narrative, and the moral landscape it exposed. That valor, however vanquished, becomes a clarion call for others to rise. The film's climax converges on Crystal Peak Bunker, an underground nexus of weapons and memories, where protagonist alliances fray and new coalitions form. Tensions peak in a strobe-lit gauntlet as Moreau, Jonah, and Owen must navigate a chute of collapsing corridors under hail of armor-piercing rounds. Critics hailed the sequence's relentless momentum, a tour de force of stunts and editing that knits together practical explosions, simulated zero-gravity traps, and digital overlays tracing each hero's vitals. Beneath its breakneck surface, the scene carries a critical subtext. Humanity's technological marvels, once lauded as triumphs, become instruments of oppression when wielded without conscience. Reviewers pointed to the moment when Owen disables the bunker security grid by sacrificing his own microchip implant, a symbolic unshackling of humanity from tech's iron grip. Emerging into the dawn, the heroes face a final moral crucible: to deploy the EMP that will cripple every electronic monster and risk plunging the world's hospitals, transport, and communications into darkness. In a masterstroke of dramatic irony, the film mirrors its opening eruption with a silent, glowing wave of electromagnetic hush that cascades across continents. Critics celebrated the scene's multivalent impact. It functioned as blockbuster spectacle, sci-fi catharsis, and grave ethical question rolled into one. Major outlets lauded the writing's courage to deny a simple all-clear, opting instead to show the immediate fallout. Hospital monitors flatlining, electric wheelchairs stalling in hallways, neighborhoods plunged into darkness. The choice underscored the film's ambivalent stance on technology. Sometimes, the only way to save ourselves is to reset the world we've built, consequences be damned. In its final frames, the film captures a tableau both elegiac and hopeful. Survivors, human and dinosaur, huddled beneath a sky streaked with subsonic flares of dawn, the promise of coexistence shimmering against ruin. Critics nodded to this ambiguity as the film's greatest thematic achievement. It neither succumbs to naive optimism nor sinks into cynical despair. Instead, it stakes out a middle ground where redemption demands risk, and the price of progress is eternal vigilance. Casting the bridge betrayal scene required a perfect balance of stunt skill and emotional weight. When Claire Danes performed her signature monologue atop the crumbling rope bridge, she did so without a stunt double, leaning into gaps where safety nets lay concealed 30 feet below. During rehearsals, grips placed small cameras in the planks to ensure harness lines wouldn't show, yet on the day of shooting, a single cable slipped free, sending her tumbling 2 feet onto a padded mat. She popped up with a grin, quipping, "Well, that'll keep me honest." The director approved one of these takes, feeling the genuine shock in her performance rendered the betrayal all the more palpable. In the bog-like marshes doubling for Sicily's hidden valley, the production used biodegradable smoke pellets to create ephemeral mist hovering above the water's surface. One particularly humid morning turned the marsh into a soupy mire. The pellets sank before releasing any smoke, leaving cast and crew ankle-deep in smelly sludge. Local laborers hastily threw a layer of straw over the worst patches, improvising a duckboard path for actors clad in brand-new costumes. The straw, soaked through, lent an earthy aroma to the scene that, when paired with the score, critics described as viscerally immersive, praising the filmmakers for their embrace of on-the-fly problem-solving. In the editing bay, the film's assembly cut played like a whirlwind of action and dread until a video playback operator noticed a single frame dropped a second too long. It showed a helicopter crashing in the distance, an unplanned echo of early footage meant as a stand-in. Rather than delete it, the editors extended the shot slightly, weaving in a haunting shot of black smoke curling into a crimson sky. That brief moment, less than a second in the final cut, reappeared in posters and became a focal point for cinephiles dissecting the film's visual leitmotifs. Composer Marco Beltrami recorded the film's main theme in an abandoned synagogue, using the space's natural echo to capture cavernous reverb. Strings bounced off chipped plaster walls, creating a tone both sacred and foreboding. During playback in the studio, sound engineers discovered that the echo added a subsonic undertone, a bass frequency that vibrated seats in theaters, making audiences' chests thrum with unease. Beltrami dubbed it the heartbeat of evolution, a sonic signature that underscored every moment of triumph and terror. When the film premiered in London, the director decided to recreate the film's iconic hashtag prints on commuters' tickets. The London Underground distributed 10,000 vouchers printed with hashtag "No Fate But What We Make" over a weekend. Ridership spiked on the Jubilee line, and social media lit up with selfies of commuters holding their dinosaur-branded fare. Though the experiment cost the studio a small fortune, the buzz it generated was deemed irreplaceable, a testament to how marketing stunts can blur into public art. In Mexico City, midnight screenings drew waitlists around the block when some theaters offered limited-edition Dino chocolates, handcrafted milk chocolate bars shaped like miniature dinosaur bones, wrapped in wrappers illustrated with DNA helix motifs. Fans tweeted photos of their bars melting in the heat. Some slipped into freezer selfies. One viral meme showed a chocolate velociraptor skeleton dripping across a melting ice cream cone, captioned, "When the future creeps up on you." The confectionery tie-in was so successful that competitors attempted knockoff fossil gummies, though none matched the cult status of the original. Back in the VFX suites, artists collaborated remotely with teams in Mumbai, Vancouver, and Stockholm, using cloud rendering farms to crunch through petabytes of data. During the final push, one London artist noticed a glitch causing distant mountain peaks to warp like reflections in heat haze. The fix required rewriting a custom shader at 3 a.m. local time. By sunrise, the warped peaks had become the film's signature, blowing through social media analyses that called it the fractal edge of 21st century fidelity. In the years since release, fan conventions have showcased decommissioned props, a raptor training whip, a battered leather jacket from the paleobotanist's rescue outfit, and a chunk of animatronic skin from the hybrid beetle sequence. Each item carries stories of late-night repairs, impromptu improvisations, and occasional bites from overeager animals. Fans line up for hours to pose with these relics, whispering to the guide about the moment the whip's fiber core snapped or the jacket's zipper jammed on take 27. A storm of minutiae that transforms movie magic into living legend even now. The film's production anecdotes ripple through workshops on set design and stunt safety, testaments to ingenuity under pressure. Every spilled coffee stain on a script notebook, every illegible margin note scrawled by a bleary-eyed writer, and every sunburn incurred filming desert exteriors became threads in the tapestry of this cinematic odyssey. In its wake, audiences inherited more than just a story of dinosaurs and destiny. They gained a backstage pass to the alchemy of collaboration, where art and accident fused to resurrect the ancient world in all its perilous wonder. Ultimately, the strangest fact of all is that, amid the roar of practical pyro and the pulse of digital mastery, the most enduring magic was born not from carefully plotted shots but from the glorious unpredictability of life itself, on set and beyond. The first time the camera sweeps across the island's jagged coastline, the sky is a bruised canvas of violet and steel. Foam-tipped waves crash against black basalt cliffs that gleam like spilled ink under the dying light. It is here, on the very edge of the world, that the story finds its most elemental heartbeat. The volcanic rock thrusts skyward in spires, hollowed by ancient lava flows into tunnels and chimneys where steam still hisses. In these crevices, the film's creatures hide between shots, clipped matrices of reptilian scales catching stray sunlight, footsteps echoing through hollow chambers like distant thunder. Each shot feels sculpted by the Earth's fury, a reminder that our heroes walk upon the slow pulse of creation itself. At dawn, the camera drifts past a grove of ghostly pines whose wind-whipped needles whisper like lost memories. The mist curls through their trunks, softening every edge until the world feels half-remembered. It is in this hour that a long-lens shot captures two figures, Claire and Owen, tracing the shoreline in silhouette. The wide shot, flattened by a 50mm lens, flattens distance into a memory, compressing sea and sky into a single plane of longing. Here, the setting is not backdrop but character. Each dune and driftwood log carries the ghosts of past catastrophes and faint promises of reconciliation between man and beast. Through this vista, the film gently suggests that renewal must begin in places scarred by fire and flood. Later, deep in the island's volcanic caldera, the story enters the core of Sky Labs. The compound hunkers against the wind like a fortress of steel ribs. Paned windows flicker under floodlights that paint the walls in antiseptic green, each corridor a fluorescent vein leading to the heart of biotechnical ambition. Production designers layered peeling paint on every doorframe, scuffed metal on every threshold. In these crevices, the film's creatures hide between shots, clipped matrices of reptilian scales catching stray sunlight, footsteps echoing through hollow chambers like distant thunder. Each shot feels sculpted by the Earth's fury, a reminder that our heroes walk upon the slow pulse of creation itself. At dawn, the camera drifts past a grove of ghostly pines whose wind-whipped needles whisper like lost memories. The mist curls through their trunks, softening every edge until the world feels half-remembered. It is in this hour that a long-lens shot captures two figures, Claire and Owen, tracing the shoreline in silhouette. The wide shot, flattened by a 50mm lens, flattens distance into a memory, compressing sea and sky into a single plane of longing. Here, the setting is not backdrop but character. Each dune and driftwood log carries the ghosts of past catastrophes and faint promises of reconciliation between man and beast. Through this vista, the film gently suggests that renewal must begin in places scarred by fire and flood. Later, deep in the island's volcanic caldera, the story enters the core of Sky Labs. The compound hunkers against the wind like a fortress of steel ribs. Paned windows flicker under floodlights that paint the walls in antiseptic green, each corridor a fluorescent vein leading to the heart of biotechnical ambition. Production designers layered peeling paint on every doorframe, scuffed metal on every threshold, so that every corner bristles with the odor of chipped ambition. In wide shots, the lab's geometry, a kaleidoscope of right angles and curved walkways, reads like a circuit board, underscoring the film's exploration of the thin line between living organism and engineered algorithm. Within the lab's bowels, low-angle tracking shots glide along chrome railings toward sealed containment cells. Each cell's glass is etched with warning symbols that glow faintly in pneumatic haze. The cinematography embraces chiaroscuro. A lone light bulb flares above a hatchway while the edges fall into inky blackness. In these moments, the camera's eye becomes a predator, stalking every hum of refrigeration and drip of condensation as if the machinery itself were alive. When laboratory rats scurry across grated floors, the macro lens lingers on each whisker twitch, an intimate portrayal of life distilled to its trembling core. From clinical hallways, the film leaps to the Alps, where a borrowed gondola car spins on rusted cables high above a chasm of ice. Here, snow squalls dance in fractured beams from handheld spotlights, creating spangled motes that swirl like cosmic dust. The camera, strapped to a harness beside the actors, moves in subtle arcs that emulate the gondola's pendulous sway. Its movements are never linear. They trace curves that mimic the human heart's disquiet as the characters confront vertigo and peril. The mountain slopes fall away into a vaporous gray, so that each foothold feels borrowed from myth, temporary and trembling. As the characters disembark onto an abandoned research outpost perched above the tree-line, the set's stark concrete forms emerge from the mist in angular relief. Brutalist walls etched with frost patterns flank a single open doorway leading into darkness. When the lights flick on inside, the camera retreats to reveal a grandiose atrium, pillars of reinforced steel converging toward a vaulted ceiling pierced by barred skylights. In these great halls, the film relinquishes intimacy for experimentation with scale. Every echoing footstep resonates like a heartbeat, and flashes of practical flame jets transform the sterile interior into a cataclysmic spectacle. The juxtaposition of human fragility against this cavernous shell underscores the film's meditation on hubris and impermanence. Back down in Sicily, the island's human settlements appear in sun-splashed glory. Terracotta rooftops dotting olive groves beneath a sapphire sky, laundry lines strung with pastel linens stirring in the breeze. The camera lingers on open market stalls where vendors hawk citrus fruits and woven baskets. It moves in gentle dollies that feel like a lazy afternoon stroll, capturing the gentle rhythms of daily life before the imminent storm. These scenes bristle with warm, golden light, soaked in nostalgia and tempered by the knowledge that paradise often hides its own despair. Every sun-dappled lane feels like a lived memory, a testament that beauty persists even when the world trembles. Within one such village, a 360-degree dolly shot circles Eurotrucks laden with livestock, the camera passing through church spires and vine-draped balconies. It embraces the villagers' gazes, wide with curiosity and suspicion, against the backdrop of mountains that pare the sky into jagged shards. Here, The setting serves as a crucible for cultural collision. Modern science descends upon dusty squares where time seems to flow older than any experiment. The film's language shifts, the lens aperture tightening to isolate faces etched with lines of wisdom and fear. Even a stray cat winding between crates of tomatoes carries symbolic weight, reminding us that all creatures share the same canvas under the Mediterranean. Soon as dusk blooms into a violet gloom, the narrative finds its sanctuary sequence in a hidden valley. Here, the camera rises on a crane, lifting through curtains of ivy to reveal a flood of green so intense it seems phosphorescent. Ferns unfurl like ancient tongues, and flowers gas on vines as though reaching for a remembered sun. The valley's centerpiece, a tranquil pond, mirrors the sky so precisely that the boundary between water and air dissolves. In this prolonged wide shot, the film honors the sublime. Time stretches, sound falls away, and the distant calls of waterbirds become a sacred hymn to survival. The cinematography here borrows from the language of romantic landscape painting, urging viewers to contemplate their place within the living tapestry. From the Valley of Eden, the film's scope shrinks to the intimate world of the paleobotanist's campsite, a little clearing ringed by twisted oaks and lantern light that flickers like fireflies. Handheld close-ups capture her trembling fingers as she sketches leaf cross-sections by lantern glow, the graphite smudges tracking the ridges of her knuckles. The camera hovers at her shoulder, its presence a silent partner in discovery. In these moments, the environment becomes a living laboratory, each rustling leaf and crackling flame a data point in the film's broader ecological thesis. By focusing so closely on the minutiae, the pattern of moss on a stone, the dew trembling on a leaf, the film underscores how tiny wonders anchor the grand arc of existence. The jungle creeks that ripple through the island's southern flank offer their own cinematic poetry. Here, the water glows with phosphorescent charge simulated through fiber optic lines buried beneath cobblestone. Slate-gray boulders framed by molten green algae pulses like living veins. Long takes follow the camera as it drifts along the creek's surface, bobbing over rapids and gliding under tangled roots. The use of a stabilized handheld buoy captures both the water's serenity and its hidden currents, the promise of calm between the violence of change. It is in this liquid mirror that the film revisits its central question. Who commands whom, and can we ever truly betray the natural tides that birthed us? In the film's climactic scenes, the camera thrusts into subterranean trenches beneath Crystal Peak. Here, jagged concrete and steel rebar form a cavernous labyrinth lit by emergency strobes. The use of a stabilized handheld buoy captures both the water's serenity and its hidden currents, the promise of calm between the violence of change. It is in this liquid mirror that the film revisits its central question. Who commands whom, and can we ever truly betray the natural tides that birthed us? In the film's climactic scenes, the camera thrusts into subterranean trenches beneath Crystal Peak. Here, jagged concrete and steel rebar form a cavernous labyrinth lit by emergency strobes. The strobe's harsh pulses carve this underworld into a staccato of shadows and flickers, each flash revealing something half-glimpsed, a slithering shadow, a handprint smeared in grease, a fallen lantern. The cinematography employs jump cuts that sync with each strobe pulse, creating a visceral sense of disorientation perfectly mirroring the character's panic. In this set piece, the dialogue falls away in service of pure sensory immersion as the characters race toward a crate of electrified launchers. The pulse of the strobes, the thrum of failing generators, and the gasp of collapsing architecture converge into a single, heart-stopping rhythm. Above ground, the final electromagnet pulse sequence resets the world in a silent wave. To achieve this, the filmmakers blended full-scale EMP rigs, on-set Tesla coils humming electric blue arcs, with CGI overlays that map the pulse's expansion across global landmarks. The sequence opens with a shot of a power grid monitor, its needles quivering before plunging to zero. The camera cuts to urban skylines, each shot flickered by local outages. Neon signs sputter, traffic lights freeze, and digital billboards fade to black. The editing pace slows to match the pulse's sweep, each cut spaced to let the weight of technological hush sink into viewers' bones. Cinematographically, the shift from frantic handheld chaos to measured quilt of wide shots underscores the film's primary thesis. that in the absence of technology, we are at once liberated and unmoored. Closing on a sunlit ridge, the film returns to the primal landscape where human and dinosaur stand side by side. A long dolly shot follows from behind as the characters descend into a valley reborn, fields of tall grass shivering beneath a gentle breeze. The lens flattens perspective, merging their silhouettes into a single line against the horizon. The final frame, captured in creamy soft focus, dissolves into a glow that feels less like a dissolve and more like dawn awakening the world. In that radiant epilogue, the setting completes its journey, from volcanic fury to sanctified quiet, from sterile great halls to wind-kissed meadows. It reminds us that no matter how far our stories carry us through steel and circuit, our true cradle remains the wild, breathing earth itself. Throughout, color palettes shift to mirror emotional arcs. Volcanic scenes drenched in smoldering reds and oranges, laboratory interiors washed in clinical greens and cold blues, sanctuary sequences painted in verdant jade and sunlight gold. Lens choices bend reality. Ultra-long telephotos compress landscapes into mosaic tapestries. Unearthed wide angles capture the raw scope of living experiments. Macro lenses reveal textures of scale and life that often go unnoticed. Lighting schemes evolve from harsh fluorescence to diffused, dappled shafts of natural light, guiding viewers' empathy from sterile dread to loving wonder. Practical and digital effects intertwine seamlessly. Real steam augmented by CGI wisps, animatronic claws blended with digital flecks for micro-expressions, subsonic rumbles recorded on set feeding the surround channels for a visceral, chest-thumping experience. In every location and through every visual element, the film honors a single truth: that setting is more than scenery, and cinematography more than technique. Together, they become storytellers in their own right, whispering subtexts about hubris and reverence, about the fragile dance between mankind's ambitions and nature's unyielding laws. And as the credits roll, audiences depart with images of blackened cliffs and sunlit groves etched in memory. Proof that when camera and setting entwine in cinematic alchemy, the world we glimpse on screen can change how we see our own. The day began before dawn on a remote backlit outside Atlanta, where mist curled around skeletal frameworks of what would become a jungle temple. The crew arrived in the hush of half-light, coffee in hand, to find vines twisted across steel girders courtesy of the art department's overnight grafting experiments. One of the grips, known for his pranks, had swapped the canned smoke contents with dry ice, and when the fog machines roared to life that morning, the jungle billowed like a living dream. The visual effects supervisor, arriving late and bleary-eyed, stepped into a wall of white vapor, stumbled out laughing, and declared it the most realistic humidity he'd ever felt. Inside the trailer village, Natalie and Bryce, our intrepid leads, found their usual green room transformed into a makeshift botanical lab. Prop masters had borrowed exotic orchids and ferns from a local nursery to populate the hidden valley set. When Bryce wandered in at lunch, he nearly mistook a camera woman for a plant handler and apologized profusely for asking where to find the caterpillars. Natalie teased him all afternoon, crafting elaborate theories about his secret insect collection. Their good-natured banter rippled through the village, easing the tension of a shoot that involved both animatronic T-Rexes and 12-hour days. By mid-morning, the stunt team was rigging the Velociraptor pen for an intense close-quarters sequence. They'd built a retractable floor of pneumatic panels intended to jar and shift beneath the actor's feet. On the first test, the floor reversed its program, jerking upward instead of down, with such force that a stunt performer nearly tapped the soffit with his helmet. Heartbeats trailed into the silence as cables groaned, then the team burst into relieved applause. They rebounded by reprogramming the panels with double safety checks and invited everyone to don hard hats during rehearsals, a new tradition that became affectionately dubbed Raptor Readiness.